Hare Krishna. Welcome to all the devotees online. Thank you very much for kind station and attendance on this auspicious day with the disappearance of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and the disappearance of Gadara Pandit Prabhu. Very auspicious to remember these personalities on their appearance and disappearance days. Gadar Pandit Prabhu was Srimati Radhavani coming in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, and one of the services that Gadar Pandit Prabhu would render to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was to recite Srimad Bhagavatam. Gadar Pandit Prabhu would recite Srimad Bhagavatam very, very eloquently with beautiful meter and song. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would love to hear Srimad Bhagavatam recited by Gadar Pandit. So let us associate with Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 1, Canto 1, Chapter 17, verses 28 to 41, Punishment and Reward of Kali. Om Jnanatimivandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasme Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Sarva Shastra Payusha Sarva Vedeka Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokai Kriprada Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavato Prabhu Kalivando Didaditya Shri Krishna Parivartita O Srimad Bhagavatam, O nectar churned from the ocean of all Vedic scriptures, O most prominent transcendental fruit of all the Vedas, O you enriched with the jewels of all spiritual philosophical conclusions, O you who grant spiritual vision to all the people of the world, O light breath of the Vaishnava devotees, O Lord, you are the sun which has arisen to dispel the darkness of Kali Yuga. You are actually Lord Krishna who has returned amongst us. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshasha Rayate Sarvada Sarva Sevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namastute. O Srimad Bhagavatam, I offer respectful obeisance unto you. By reading one attains transcendental bliss, for your syllables rain pure love upon the reader. You are always to be served by everyone, for you are incarnation of Lord Krishna. Madeka Bandhu Mad Sangim Mad Guru Mad Mahadana Man Nishtaraka Mad Bhagya Madananda Namastute. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O my only friend, O my companion, O my teacher, O my great wealth, O my deliverer, O my good fortune, O my bliss, I offer respectful obeisances unto you. Sadhu Sadhu Tadahi Nattini Chochataraka Hanamuncha Kada Chinmam Premna Ritkatayospura. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O give us saintliness to unsaintly, O uplift to the very fallen. Please do not ever leave me. Please become manifest in my heart and my throat, accompany of pure love of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Janmadyasya Yatonvayadi Tarata Charte Swabhigna Swarat. Tene Brahma Hidayadi Kavaye Muyanti Yat Suraya. Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatrati Sargom Risha. Damna Svena Sada Nirastakwakam Satyam Param Dhimahi. O my Lord Shri Krishna, Son of Vasudeva, O pervading personality of the body, I offer my respectful obeisance unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primal cause of all causes of creation, sustenance, destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he's independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by illusory representation of water seen in fire, land seen on water. Only because of him, the material universe is temporarily manifested by the reactions of three modes of nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent and transcendental abode, which is forever free from illusory representation of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Pranopaisha sabya kalavasmin yuge jana manda sumandam payo manda bhagyupadrita. All than one. In this iron age of Kali, many but short lives, they are quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. Narayanam Namaskritya Narachevam Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisance unto the personality of God and Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, and unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Sabai pumso paro dharmo yatho bhaktira dokshaje haituka prati yatayatma suprasiddhati. The supreme occupation dharma for all humanity is that by which man can attain to loving devotional service under the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayatya Vairagyam Jnanam Chayat Hayutukam. By rendering devotional service under the personality of God Shri Krishna, one immediately causes knowledge and attachment from the world. Vedanti tattvavidas tattvam yajnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti sabhyate. Then the transcendentalists who know the absolute truth calls non-dual substance Brahman Paramatma Bhagavan. Shru Shru Shoshadhanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Syan Mahatsevaya Vipra Punya Tirtha Nishevanat. O twice born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely free from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains eternity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. Shranvatam Swagata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Ryadantastoya Bhadrani Vidunati Suritsatam. Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is Paramatma, super soul in everyone's heart, and the benefactor, truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee, who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtues when properly heard and chanted. Nasta Prayashu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavata Thomasloke Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular tenets in the class of the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And loving service under the personal to God, who is praised with transcendental songs, establishes an irrevocable. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are continuing Srimad Bhagavatam based on the teachings of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Hare Krishna, and welcome again to all the devotees. All right, let's just see feedback from all the other devotees. If my voice is breaking up, if it's the internet on my side or your side, just let us have some feedback. And also any feedback that you can share from Canto 1, chapter 17, verses 17 to 27 that we covered last week. Please share that in the chat. So first, let me know if my sound is audible and it's not breaking up so that I can switch the internet if required. No one's responding. Hope everyone's still there. Thank you, Bhaktivinoda Prabhu. Sound is clear. So we have 1, 2, 1. Maybe somebody else can just confirm on the sound, and if there's anything from last week's lesson that you would like to share. Okay, sound is good all the way to Mauritius. All right. Thank you, Shamananda. There should be something you remember from last week. A very, very important principle that we heard from the pastime of Maj Parikshit and Bhumi and Dharma. A very, very, very important principle. Each canto, each chapter, each pastime, each situation in a pastime even each verse or section and each verse is presenting and teaching us very, very important instructions. And we may not be able to recollect and apply every single instruction from every single verse. Therefore, we associate with Srimad Bhagavatam so that Srimad Bhagavatam purifies us by that association. As we mentioned, sometimes our intelligence gets in the way of our progress because we want to use our intelligence to understand Krishna consciousness, to memorize, etc. And sometimes that can get in the way. So we should try to memorize and try to learn the philosophy of Krishna consciousness so that we can share with others and remember for our own purification. But we also want to associate with the Srimad Bhagavatam so that we get the benefit of the association. At the same time, there are certain very important principles that we must apply in our life for us to progress on this path of Krishna consciousness. Shamananda Prabhu says, and needed more clarity about thief example. If you name them, etc., the reaction, you have to discriminate, preaching, etc., call a spade, equip someone with knowledge so that they can make informed decision. Right now, we are playing both roles of Dharma, the bull, and Maj Parikshit. We have to discriminate on every aspect of life. That is how we came to Krishna consciousness, by some level of discrimination, comparison, etc. Yes, and that's the point that came out very, very clearly last week in terms of taking full responsibility. So let's just share a little. Let me first cover the power sentence by Srila Prabhupada, which also highlights this point, and then we'll just elaborate a little or clarify a little on Shamananda Prabhu's question as well. So Prabhupada's power statements. He was not falsely proud, for devotee of the Lord is equally as powerful as the Lord, and or sometimes more powerful by his grace. And any promise made by a devotee, though it may be ordinarily very difficult to fulfill, is properly executed by the grace of the Lord. And we spoke about this. This point that Prabhupada is making is very, very, very applicable to us in Srila Prabhupada's mercy. Because in Prabhupada's purports, in Prabhupada's conversations, Prabhupada has made certain promises, which, as Prabhupada says, ordinarily is very difficult to fulfill. That means for Prabhupada to fulfill is very difficult, because certain things is beyond the scope of the pure devotees. It's in the scope of Krishna's hands. But by the desire of the pure devotees, Krishna properly executes those promises. For example, one promise that Srila Prabhupada says, if you chant minimum 16 rounds nicely, attentively, you follow the 4 regular principles nicely, and you try to preach to the best of your ability, Prabhupada says, you're guaranteed to go back home, back to Godhead. Now, many people may make statements like that. But the pure devotees, when they make statements like that, by Krishna's grace, Krishna wants to execute those promises, because that reciprocation between the pure devotee and Krishna is very much there. Krishna is Bhaktavatsal, he's inclined to his devotees. So he wants to, Krishna is eager to fulfill that promise. So even though we may not be pure, we may not be qualified to go back to Godhead, but if Krishna Or rather, if we sincerely follow those promises, those instructions by Srila Prabhupada, then Krishna would be eagerly awaiting to fulfill those promises. Very, very important in terms of kripas, in terms of mercy, that we can go back to God at simply based on mercy. We want to endeavor and we want to apply the process so that we purify ourselves and revive our own dormant Krishna consciousness. But whatever shortcomings there may be, that can be overcome by the mercy of Prabhupada and Krishna. A devotee's conclusion is that no one can become a benefactor or mischief monger without the sanction of the Lord. And therefore, the devotee does not consider anyone to be directly responsible for such actions. But in both cases, he takes it for granted that either benefit or loss is God sent, and thus it is his grace. So this was another very important principle of how we should perceive the world. Bhagavatam is giving us a new set of glasses, how to see the world. And if we see the world as Shastra Chakshur, if we see the world through the eyes of the Bhagavatam, then the reactions, the experiences will be totally different. By seeing the world through the eyes of the Bhagavatam, our devotion to Krishna increases. We become lovers of Krishna. Our love for Krishna increases. Therefore, the Bhagavatam should be our guiding light. The Bhagavatam should be how we want to see the world. Whether right or wrong is immaterial. So in this material world, people, want the outcome based, right or wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. This is right, this is wrong. From the Bhagavatam's perspective, it's about pure devotion to Krishna. We could be right on every level on the material platform throughout our lives. But if we are wrong in the eyes of Krishna, what's the use? And we could be wrong in the eyes of everyone in this world from birth to death. But if we are right from Krishna's perspective, that is victory. So we want to live our life from the eyes of the Bhagavatam. Because the eyes of the Bhagavatam is Krishna. So this principle of seeing everything as Krishna's mercy, that which is a benefit, yes, thank you, Krishna. How wonderful. I got a new job that's paying me more. Thank you, Krishna. Krishna's grace. When I lose my job, thank you, Krishna. Krishna's grace. That is more difficult to see. That is more difficult to see. So training ourselves to see the good and the bad, that which is apparent a benefit and that which is apparent not a benefit, to see it as the grace of Krishna, to see Krishna's hand in that, especially as devotees, as practitioners. That is very, very important to cultivate. And when we see this principle, it leads us to the next aspect. The king said, "O you who are in the form of a bull, you know the truth of religion, and you are speaking according to the principle that the destination intended for the perpetrator of irreligious acts is also intended for one who identifies the perpetrator. You are none other than the personality of religion." So let's clarify and expand on this point. And as Shamanand Prabhu says, there are two aspects here. One is from the bull's perspective, and the other is from Maharaj Parikshit's perspective. Maharaj Parikshit has to chastise the perpetrator from his perspective. Because why? He is the ruler. He's the leader. And as the king, it is the duty of the king to protect the praja, the citizens. It is the duty of the king to eliminate all irreligious acts. That is the duty of the king. The Kshatriya kings, that was their duty. They are representatives of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So if Krishna is present, there is no irreligious acts in the presence of Krishna. Just like when the sun is present, there is no darkness. Similarly, the king, who is a representative of the Supreme Lord, has to uphold Dharma and make sure that there are no irreligious activities. So if there is a perpetrator, someone who's causing harm, someone who's transgressing religious principles, it is a duty of the king, the administrators, the leaders, to administer the laws of Dharma so that there is peace, prosperity, justice. Manu Samhita describes how a leader should administer justice, protect. Letting go thieves, rogues, abusers, perpetrators of irreligious acts, this breeds more of irreligious acts. And it's a disservice. So from the leader's perspective, it is their duty, it is their service. They have to do that. They cannot use the excuse, oh yeah, okay, no problem, there is no perpetrator, because if the perpetrator, if somebody points out a perpetrator, you can't blame him. No, if you blame him, then you also at fault. No. It does not work like that. They have a certain duty. If you are in a leadership role, it is your duty to perform those activities befitting that leadership role. Otherwise, do not take that role, because then it becomes even a greater disservice for those you're leading and yourself. So justice has to be applied according to Dharma from the king's perspective. And we're going to see today how Maharaj Parikshit, even though Maharaj Parikshit did not get a response. No, let me rephrase that. He did not get this response that, oh, the bull is blaming. Yes, there's the culprit. He's standing in front of you. He didn't get that response. So he could understand Dharma and Dharma's position, the bull's position, that the bull is no ordinary bull. This bull is no ordinary personality. It is personality of religion. Because only someone who knows religious principles will respond that way. Somebody who knows the Bhagavatam will respond that way. Somebody who knows the science and the laws of Krishna will respond this way. Someone who's a lover of Krishna will respond this way. So Maharaj Parikshit identified the bull and glorified the bull for the response, but still carried out his role as a leader to administer punishment. So that we have to be clear. It's not like an abuser gets scot-free and what to do, it's our karma. No. It does not work like that. Therefore, they are administrators, they are kshatriyas, they are leaders, they are kings that are there. Any leadership role, there is responsibilities. Okay, so that is from Maharaj Parikshit perspective. Now consider ourselves. We not individually, you can ask this question, am I a king? Am I a leader? Am I leading a country, community? If I'm a leader, then I have the role that Maharaj Parikshit represents as the king. But if I'm not a leader, that means I'm a citizen. If I'm a citizen, then what should be my perspective? My perspective should be like the bull. So the ideal leader would do the right thing, and an ideal citizen would perceive the situation in the right way. How? As the bull Dharma, the bull is showing that if something happens to me, if some unfortunate event transpires, in every single situation, I should understand it is I who am responsible for the situation. Now, someone may not be able to appreciate that, especially if there are more grievous sins or grievous abuses. If it's a simple minor, somebody, just said something nasty to you, and that was it. That's one situation. In another case, there may be a more abusive case. Now, in both cases, from the perspective of the citizen and not the leader, you should develop the consciousness that it is my fault. I must have did something in the past to get this. Point one. I am responsible for what I experience. And if you go deeper, you will find that ultimately when you have this understanding that I am responsible for the outcomes of my experiences in this world, the most important aspect that comes to the forefront is that it allows me to be accountable and take action to do something. If I am responsible, then I should take the reaction. I should be accountable for this outcome. And if I don't want this outcome in future, I should change my actions. I should change the way I think. I should change my direction. I must have did something in the past to deserve this. Therefore, I don't want it again. Let me change. Let me do something so that I will not be in the situation again. That is what is wanted. Because, administering a reaction does not change you. It may relieve your pain to some degree, but the reaction, the karmic reaction, does not get nullified. We are in this world, and as practitioners of Krishna consciousness, we want to understand that I want to go back home, back to Godhead. This is not my home. My home is the spiritual world, the lotus feet of Krishna. So as a servant, that is where I belong. I need to go back home, back to my Lord and Master. So how do you go back? There should be no karmic reaction. How do you stop karmic reaction? One way: do not find fault, do not point out the perpetrator. That means when you technically, it means that whatever happens, the perpetrator is you. This is the perpetrator, me. I'm the perpetrator. I'm the rascal. It's my fault. I need to change. When you change, there is no karmic reaction. When you take responsibility of the outcome of that action, of that circumstance, then that means that I'm not blaming anyone. That means I am cutting that reactionary cycle. Otherwise, you blame you blame someone, they blame you. You blame someone, they blame you. That reactionary cycle will continue life after life after life after life. You will be implicated. You will meet that person in your next lives, because the account has not been balanced. And in this way, we continue the cycle of karmic reaction. So one way to stop that karmic reaction is to learn this lesson. It's my fault. I may not be able to remember what I did, but it's my fault. So let me just take full responsibility and understand that I did something to be in the situation. Otherwise, I will not get it. That's one point. The second point is it's sanctioned by Krishna. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. So if Krishna sanctioned it, it came through the hands of Krishna. And if I am a servant of Krishna, then it behooves the servant to accept what the master delivers. Otherwise, what type of servant are we? Easier said than done. But that is the case. That yes, Krishna has given this to me. Why? To learn a lesson. Now, I may not know what lesson I need to learn. Pray to Krishna, my Lord, please reveal the lesson I need to learn. And if you can't really get a lesson, then here is the ultimate lesson. You left the spiritual world. Therefore, you came to this world by your own choice. And because you made the choice to come here, you are now implicated in the law of karma and action and reaction. And you are getting what you deserve according to your initial action of forgetting Krishna or leaving Krishna. And therefore, you need to change your direction. You turned your back away from Krishna, and therefore you are experiencing the darkness of your shadow. See, nobody creates your shadow but you. I can't create your shadow. I can only create my shadow. So everyone, when they turn their backs away from the sun, they see the shadow. And they live in the shadow. They experience the shadow, the darkness. Now, when you experience the darkness of your shadow, don't blame anyone else. Oh, yeah, it's the sun's fault. Oh, it's my neighbor's fault. It's your fault. No, no, it's your fault. You turned your back away from Krishna. And that shadow can come in unlimited varieties of ways and experiences, both negative and apparently positive. Nothing in this world is really positive because it's part of the material nature. The experience is part of the material nature. So we need to appreciate all my experiences is a result of me turning my back away from Krishna. Therefore, it's like here, beautiful baby Krishna is sitting. You look at his beautiful eyes. So look in Krishna's eyes. He's looking straight at you. And you tell Krishna, yes, my Lord, it's my fault because I turned away from you. Now I'm turning back to you. So now when you turn away from your shadow to the sun again, your shadow disappears. That's the light of Krishna consciousness. And now all we see is the sun. All we see now is Krishna. Now, good or bad, I don't see. In fact, all I see is the grace of Krishna. All I see is the sun, the heat and light and the sun. And now I don't experience the duality of this world. I only see the sun in every situation. That does not mean that the perpetrator should not get his due punishment. He will get his due punishment, no doubt. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. The perpetrator will get justice, Krishna's justice, or Krishna's representative's justice. Maharaj Parikshit, he will deal with the perpetrator. So your dealing with the perpetrator is totally different, and the leader, the president, the king, he needs to deal with the perpetrator in a totally different way. The most important thing from our perspective is we need to take accountability and be responsible for our own actions so that we can do something about it. We cannot keep blaming circumstances and situations and people, etc. Because if you keep blaming circumstances and people, you will never take full accountability for, the situation you're in. We are in every single situation simply because of our own actions. If we want to get out of every situation or any situation, we can if we change our ways. So therefore, it's us who need to change. And yes, you may be put in a situation and it's not like, a switch, okay, just switch it on and I'm out of the situation. No, there's a little more than that, right? Because there's some impact in terms of your psyche, the pain that you have to go through, the situation, you have to come out of that situation, right? So if it's like if you're in a ditch, you're driving and now all of a sudden you go into this big pothole that's like the size of a bath. And now, you get into there. Now to get out of that ditch is not just a, switch on and I'm out. Nope, that only works in the movies. Real life, it's going to be a struggle to get out of that ditch. But you struggle with the proper perspective. You struggle with the perspective of seeing through the eyes of the Bhagavatam. You struggle with getting inspiration, drawing inspiration from the Pandavas. You struggle from drawing inspiration from Dharma, the bull. You struggle with drawing inspiration from Srila Prabhupada, who never gave up in every single situation. And while struggling, thinking of them, you are actually liberating yourself. You are freeing yourself. And what will happen is if you never blame, then your karmic reaction is stopping. You will not be placed in that situation due to your actions in the future, because now you are learning and you are improving. The only time you'll be placed in such a situation is if Krishna so desire, which has no karmic reaction, but Krishna wants to teach others. Like we gave the example of Prahlad. Prahlad Maharaj. Krishna may put him in situations, he's a pure devotee of the Lord, but Krishna puts him in a situation to teach us that in every situation, try to remember him. Always remember Krishna and never forget him. I hope that shed a little more clarification on your question, Shyamananda Prabhu. Mother Les says, nothing moves without the Lord's sanction. Therefore, we must not judge others as being bad and accept our past karma is coming through. We need to understand that Krishna doesn't want us to suffer, but if we earn bad karma, then he has to sanction the results. Yes. Because Krishna has the right not to sanction. So here's another principle. The super soul will witness and sanction. The super soul will not interfere. So if you meant to get 10 units of karmic reaction because of your past, the super soul witness that you administered 10 units of karma to someone. Therefore, you must get 10 units of karma back. Now in this life, the circumstances are perfectly aligned. The weather is perfectly aligned. The people around you is perfectly aligned. Earth is perfectly aligned. You perfectly aligned. Your karma is getting perfectly aligned to administer that 10 units of karmic reaction, and it is coming through your neighbor. Because he just happened to be perfectly aligned with your karmic situation, and karma is administered, and there you get your 10 units of karmic reaction. Now, when you get the 10 units of karmic reaction, the super soul witnessed your past, approved, yes, this is what you did. It's recorded. You're going to get 10 units back. Circumstance perfectly aligned. You get your 10 units of karmic reaction, and karma is administered. Balance, equal. As you sowed, so you reap. Balance, nullified. So technically, when you got the 10 units of karmic reaction, you scot free. That means your count has reduced. Right? You had 10 units outstanding, 10 units paid, balance 0. But if you didn't go through the Bhagavatam, you would now look at your neighbor and say, it's your fault. Oops. Super soul says, oh, you blaming. You're not taking action. Every action has equal opposite reaction. Now, you go in to get 5 units of karmic reaction or 20 units of karmic reaction for your actions that you are now getting implicated in. So now instead of 0 balance, you got a negative balance again. And future circumstance to prevail for you to get those reactions. And if you don't learn, well, it's coming again and again and again and again. So therefore, when you get when you get any reaction, it's like you hit your toe on the door or on the chair. Ouch. Now you can break the chair, blame the chair, blame the door, break the door. It's not going to resolve the situation. It's going to implicate or create more. So it's going to worsen the situation. But when you get that pain, what you need to think is, thank you, Krishna. I just burnt up some of my karma. And thank you, Krishna. You just gave me a token reaction. I deserve worse. Thank you, Krishna. Thank you, Krishna, for giving me a reality check that this world is not fit for a gentleman. Thank you, Krishna, for reminding me I shouldn't be complacent and casual. I should take spiritual life seriously so that I will never experience this again. And in this way, that pain becomes an avenue to improve in Krishna consciousness. And if a leader is there, the parent is there, the guru is there, the president is there, they will do what's required to help the situation, to improve the situation with the perpetrators. Thank you very much. Everyone's feedback. Let us proceed. So we're going to be covering 28 to 41. Maharaj Parikshit expertly gives residence to the ironically surrendered Kali. Text 28. Iti dharmam maham, iti dharmam mahim chaiva, sant tvei vitva mahatrata, nishatam adeda kadgam, kalaye dharma hetave. Maharaj Parikshit, who could fight 1,000 enemies single-handedly, thus specified the personality of religion and earth. Then he took up his sword. Then he took up his sharp sword to kill the personality of Kali, who is the cause of irreligion. So here we see now how much Parikshit is responding. He didn't say, oh yes, there is no perpetrator. You didn't blame anyone? Or you blame yourself? Okay, then I can't do anything. It's okay. Let's go home. Nope. He took up his sword. Why? Because he is a dharmic king. He's a saintly king. He understands his position. He understands the principles of dharma. He is Krishna conscious. So he knows his duty. He knows how to perceive the truth. So he could see that dharma responded in a very, very Krishna conscious way. And therefore, and because he is a Krishna conscious king, he also responded very favorably. So such a wonderful situation. Dharma the bull did not implicate in further reactions, and Maharaj Parikshit did not get further reaction at this point by neglecting his duty as a king. He acted dutifully, immediately took up his sword and was ready to kill. Not just, okay, you saw the sword, I got a sword, just be careful. No, not warning. He was ready to kill the personality of Kali. Just consider, Kali had not killed the bull. Kali was beating the bull. But Maharaj Parikshit was ready to administer death sentence. This is Manu Samhita. This is religious principles. If you cause pain to someone, and if the law says death sentence is there, in that country, in that community, people will think twice to commit harm to the next citizen. Prabhupada in the purport says, as described above, the personality of Kali is he who deliberately commits all kinds of sinful acts which are forbidden in the revealed scriptures. I'd like to extend this statement that Srila Prabhupada starts and apply it in our own lives. If we deliberately commit sinful acts which are forbidden in the revealed scriptures, we should understand we are influenced by the personality of Kali. If we know what's right and wrong, and if we do the wrong thing, we should know that our consciousness is influenced by the personality of Kali. And we need to eradicate Kali from our consciousness. Because as long as Kali is in our consciousness, and we do not abide by the principles of devotional service, the first two principles of surrender to Krishna is to accept things favorable and reject things unfavorable. So if we are doing something that's wrong, that's unfavorable, then that is not conducive for my devotion. I should avoid sinful acts. I should avoid those things which are unfavorable. And being conditioned, I will be influenced by Kali, no doubt. I'm in this world I'm in Kali's age, it's Kali's time. So I'm influenced from birth. But by the association of the Bhagavatam, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, by the mercy of the process, by chanting Hare Krishna, by the mercy of the devotees, I can gain strength to say no, to stop sinful activities. This age of Kali will certainly be full of activities of Kali. But this does not mean that the leaders of the society, the executive heads, the learned and the intelligent men, or above all the devotees of the Lord, should sit down tightly and become careless to the reactions of the age of Kali. Yeah, what to do, Prabhu, is my karma. Or the leader says, yeah, what to do, it's karma. It's the age of Kali, what to do, we should just carry on, chant Hare Krishna, be happy. No. Maharaj Parikshit didn't say, okay, chant Hare Krishna, Kali chant Hare Krishna, Boo chant Hare Krishna. No. No Hare Krishna, yeah. Hare Krishna means take the sword and kill. There has to be action. So therefore, Prabhupada is saying that this age of Kali will certainly be full of activities of Kali. But this does not mean that the leaders of the society, the executive heads, the learned, the intelligent men, or above all, the devotees of the Lord. So there's a great responsibility that we have as devotees of the Lord to fight Kali. Should not sit down tightly and become callous to the reactions of the age of Kali. So whatever is happening around us, Prabhupada is inspiring us to take action, to do something to fight Kali. Motherless says, using anger in the right way, defend a devotee of the Lord. Yes. Then Prabhupada continues. In the rainy season, certainly there will be profuse rainfalls, but that does not mean that men should not take means to protect themselves from the rains. It is the duty of the executive heads of the state and others to take all necessary actions against the activities of Kali or the persons influenced by the age of Kali. And we'll see in all these purports, Srila Prabhupada is going to hammer this point. Prabhupada is instructing the executive heads in terms of what is their duty. And Maharaj Parikshit is the ideal executive head of the state, for at once he was ready to kill the personality of Kali with his sharp sword. The administrators should not simply pass resolutions for anti-corruptional steps, but they must be ready with sharp swords to kill the persons creating corruptions from the angle of vision of the recognized Shastras. The administrators cannot prevent corrupt activities by allowing wine shops and at the same time making propaganda for people to stop drinking. They must at once close all the shops selling intoxicating drugs and wine and force punishment, even by death, for those who indulge in habits of intoxication of all descriptions. That is the way of stopping the activities of Kali as exhibited herein by Maharaj Parikshit, the Maharatha. So as leaders, this is very, very crucial. This is setting the example. Otherwise, it breeds further and further transgression. Oh, nothing happened to me, so no problem, I can carry on. And in this way, innocent people are impacted. So, very important instruction for leaders, administrators, executive heads. 29. Taj jighasum abhipretya vihaya nripa lanchanam tatpadamulam shirasha samagad bhaya vivala. When the personality of Kali understood that the king was willing to kill him, he at once abandoned the dress of a king and under pressure of fear completely surrendered to him, bowing his head. Now Kali is also very intelligent. And here we see Kali very, very quickly changing his tune, but changing his tune in a way that is aligned to religious principles. So immediately reveals himself, first step. That means he admits, yes, I'm at fault. This is me, I'm the rascal, you can see, I'm disguised. But actually, I'm not a king, I'm a Sudra, I'm Kali. So he reveals himself. He accepts, yes, I'm at fault. And then he surrenders. Under pressure of fear, completely surrendered to him. He surrenders completely to Maharaj Parikshit. Prabhupada says, the royal dress of personality of Kali is artificial. royal dress is suitable for a king or Kshatriya, but when a low-class man artificially dress himself as a king, his real identity is disclosed by the challenge of a bona fide Kshatriya like Maharaj Parikshit. A real Kshatriya never surrenders. He accepts the challenge of his rival Kshatriya, and he fights either to die or to win. Surrender is unknown to a real Kshatriya. In the age of Kali, there are so many pretenders dressing and posing as administrators or as executive head, but the real identity is disclosed when they are challenged by a real Kshatriya. Therefore, when the artificially dressed personality of Kali saw that to fight Maharaj Parikshit was beyond his ability, he bowed down to his head like a subordinate and gave up his royal dress. So Kali surrenders to Maharaj Parikshit, and now put yourself in the situation of Dharma the bull. You're seeing, as you see in this picture, Dharma bull is there, bleeding, legs broken, standing on one leg. And Dharma the bull is noticing Maharaj Parikshit taking action and ready to kill the perpetrator. If we in that situation and now we think, yes, that rascal needs to be punished, you just got trapped again. You just got trapped again. So trying to keep yourself aloof of the reaction and the situation is very, very important. Sometimes a situation transpires and, like Prabhupada has instituted certain laws in our movement. So one law is that if you're not happy with the situation, you can then escalate that to the higher management. But in most cases, when we escalate it to higher management, we still want an outcome. We're interested in outcome. We want a resolution. We want something out of that. But your duty was to let the top management know, and now the responsibility has passed to them. If they don't do something, they get the reaction. But if you are interested in the outcome and the result, you also get implicated. Our duty is to do what's right and leave the reaction and the outcome of the reaction to Krishna. He's the judge. Let him judge and let him administer the reaction to every situation, to every individual. Our duty is simply to serve and to follow. And if we are a leader, if we're an executive head, like Maharaj Parikshit, then it is our duty to protect those who are dependent, to do what is right in every circumstance. And it's not easy, but then we wouldn't be in that position. We are given that position to do the right thing as a leader. So Kali surrenders. Now the bull, if he sees the situation, he says, oh, this is unfair. What is Maharaj Parikshit going to do? And if Maharaj Parikshit let Kali free, then the bull should also not see that as unfair. There has to be detachment. And especially if you did not find fault to the perpetrator, then you would not link Kali to your situation. You would not link what happens to Kali in this situation to your situation. Because in the first place, you did not find fault. You said you to be blamed. Therefore, I need to change. And because you are saying I need to change, what happens in the king's kingdom, how Maharaj Parikshit handles the citizens, that's up to him. It is not because it's not that he's handling Kali because of me. No, my situation was because of me, right? and that the king will deal, Maharaj Parikshit will deal with me later on, etc. But now he's dealing with Kali according to Kali's business. And what happens with the king and Kali is technically none of my business. That separation and detachment has to be cultivated. Patitam padayor vira kripaya dinavatsala sharanyo nava dikslokyam aha chedam asam iva. Maharaj Parikshit was qualified to accept surrender, and whose glories are worthy of being sung in history, did not kill the poor, surrendered and fallen Kali, but smiled compassionately, for he was kind to the poor. So now, if you were interested in justice, I want, the perpetrator to be killed. Now you'll be even more in pain. What the heck is going on here now? Maharaj Parikshit is compassionate. He's smiling. Like, what's wrong with him? Now you just implicated yourself in another reaction of blaming Maharaj Parikshit. This is how the law of karma implicates you. It's like when the spider, when the fly gets trapped, one leg gets trapped into the web of the spider. And now the fly blames the spider and pushes the next leg, gets trapped, the next leg gets trapped, the next kid, and before you know it, the fly is completely enwrapped in the spider's web. So like that, we get implicated in one reaction after another by not understanding Krishna's laws and how they work in this world. Even an ordinary Kshatriya does not kill a surrendered soul. What to speak of Maharaj Parikshit, who was by nature compassionate and kind to the poor. He was smiling because the artificially dressed Kali had disclosed his identity as a lower class man, and he was thinking how ironic that it was that although no one had ever been saved from his sharp sword, when he desired to kill the poor lower class Kali, was spared by his timely surrender. Maharaj Parikshit's glory and kindness are therefore sung in history. He was a kind and compassionate emperor, fully worthy of accepting surrender even from his enemy. Thus, the personality of Kali was saved by the will of providence. So Kali did the right thing, he surrendered. Maharaj Parikshit did the right thing. He did not kill a surrendered soul, because that is the culture. When you surrender to Krishna or Krishna's pure devotees, you are under the shelter. They will protect you. So this is another lesson we can learn from Kali. Here we are learning a wonderful lesson from Kali. From that personality who wants to do everything against religious principles, we are learning a very powerful principle of surrender. If Kali, who is the personification of irreligion, could be saved by the process of surrender, why can we not be protected and saved when we surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead or His pure representative? Kali had firm faith that if I surrender to Maharaj Parikshit, he will protect me. Because Maharaj Parikshit is a Raj Rishi, he's a saintly king, he's a devotee king. And he abides by these principles. When Krishna says, Sarva dharman parityaja mam ekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papabhyo mokshayasi mama sucha. If you surrender to me, I will protect you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. When the Supreme Lord himself is giving that promise, how can we doubt that if I surrender to Krishna, I will not be protected? Let us learn this lesson from Kali. If Kali can follow in that footsteps of surrendering and having firm faith that he will not be killed, his life will be spared, then it behooves us to cultivate that faith that if I surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I surrender to Shri Krishna, Radha Krishna, to Hare Krishna, to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, absolute truth, then I will be protected. 31. Rajo Vacha Nate Guda Kesha Yasho Dharanam Baddanjale Vai Payam Astikinchid Navartitavyam Bhavata Katanchana Kshetre Madhye Tvam Dharma Bandhu. The king said, we have inherited the fame of Arjuna. Therefore, since you have surrendered yourself with folded hands, you need not fear for your life. But you cannot remain in my kingdom, for you are a friend of irreligion. So Maharaj Parikshit is protecting the Kali, saved his life. It's not going to kill him. But at the same time, even though he's not killed, he still is administering a level of punishment to protect the citizens. So this is another principle the leaders need to learn. If somebody is a perpetrator, if somebody is an abuser, if somebody is doing something wrong, yes, we may not kill them, but that does not mean that nothing happens to them. And whatever the situation is, whatever they were doing before, they can carry on doing that without any repercussion or consequences. No, there has to be consequences. And here we see what Kali, that okay, you're not going to be killed, but that doesn't mean you can still stay around. It doesn't mean you still can carry on your nonsense. No. So a perpetrator still has to be punished even when he surrenders. Because that also gives sign to others that may want to follow the perpetrator. That, oh, he didn't get scot-free. He surrendered, but still he's getting punished. Therefore, I should also be careful. So the lesson still has to be learned. And for the perpetrator, for Kali, that punishment, even though you surrender, doesn't mean now you're scot-free and you can still carry on. No, you're still going to get a reaction. So in this way, Maharaj Parikshit is showing by his own example that there has to still be some level of punishment to rectify the perpetrator. The personality of Kali, who is the friend of all kinds of irreligiosities, may be excused if he surrenders, but in all circumstances, he cannot be allowed to live as a citizen in any part of a welfare state. So yes, you're scot-free. You're not going to be killed. But there is still there is ramification, there is punishment. And you have to adjust. So if somebody, for example, abuses, we may not kill that abuser in the society, but some punishment has to be there. Especially, let's say, if you're a leader, then some consequence, some circumstance need to change. Do some menial devotional service. Wash pots. That way, it will be purifying for you. It will also give a strong message. So in this way, we see Maharaj Parikshit administering a very strong rule that I'm not killing you, but that doesn't mean you can stay around. The Pandavas were entrusted representatives of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, who practically brought into being the battle of Kurukshetra, but not for any personal interest. He wanted an ideal king like Maharaj Yudhishthira and his descendants like Maharaj Parikshit to rule the world. And therefore, a responsible king like Maharaj Parikshit could not allow the friend of irreligiosity to flourish in his kingdom at the cost of the good fame of the Pandavas. That is the way of wiping out corruption in the state and not otherwise. The friends of irreligiosity should be banished from the state, and that will save the state from corruption. So you can see Maharaj Parikshit is managing the situation in a very, very responsible and dutiful way, befitting his lineage, befitting his forefathers, befitting the Pandavas, and befitting how Krishna wants him to lead the society. The whole Mahabharata war was to establish Yudhishthira as the ideal king to rule this world. And if Maharaj Parikshit now lets Kali scot-free, then that whole battle of Kurukshetra that Krishna arranged to establish Maharaj Yudhishthira would have been gone to waste. So Maharaj Parikshit had to follow in the line of the great leaders that he was coming, the lineage that he was coming to in. So it's a grave, very, very grave and important responsibility. 32. Tvam vartamanam manam nara devade deheswa anupravrito yam ardharma puga loba nritam choryam anaryam amho jeshta cha maya kalaha cha damba. If the personality of Kali, irreligion, is allowed to act as a man god or an executive head, certain irreligious principles like greed, falsehood, robbery, incivility, treachery, misfortune, cheating, quarrel, and vanity will abound. So if proper punishment is not administered, this is the consequence. This is the ramification. It's costly. And therefore, the executive heads have a grave responsibility. And we see as Kali progresses, the leaders are not representing Maharaj Parikshit. And therefore, Kali thrives more and more and more. And all these symptoms become more and more prevalent in the age of Kali. The principles of religion, namely austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness, as we have already discussed, may be followed by the followers of any faith. There is no need to turn from Hindu to Mohammedan, from Mohammedan to Christian, or to some other faith, and thus become a renegade and not follow the principles of religion. The Bhagavatam religion urges following the principles of religion. The principles of religion are not the dogma or regular principles of a certain faith. Such regular principles may be different in terms of time and place concerned. One has to see whether the aims of religion have been achieved. Sticking to dogmas and formulas without attaining the real principle is not good. A secular state may be impartial to any particular type of faith, but the state cannot be indifferent to the principles of religion as mentioned above. But in the age of Kali, the executive heads of state will be indifferent to such religious principles, and thus, under the patronage of the opponents of religious principles such as greed, falsehood, cheating, and pilfering, will naturally follow. And so there will be no meaning to propaganda trying to stop corruption in the state. I was making a point that the principles of religion should be followed. immaterial of the faith. You could be a Hindu, Muslim, Jew, Tamil, Christian, whatever. It doesn't matter. Your faith doesn't matter. Every single soul needs to follow the principles of religion. And the principle of religion, austerity, cleansing, mercy, and truthfulness, everyone has to follow. Immaterial of the faith you afflated with. And the king is meant to administer, the state is meant to administer principles of religion, which transcends faith in terms of Hindu, Muslim, Jew, Tamil, etc. So there are certain principles, and the Bhagavatam is propounding those principles that are universally applicable, immaterial of the situation. And if the state does not enforce, the executive heads of the state does not enforce these principles of religion, immaterial of who you are, then the consequences, Prabhupada is explaining, the friends of Kali will increase. And no matter how much people go and show their placards, propaganda crying, we want this to stop, we don't like this, etc. It's not going to change anything. It's basically just simply noise. Why? Because firstly, the executive heads of the state, they are not representing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, they are not following the proper tenets of leadership as laid out by the Vedas. 33. Navartitavyam tad dharma bando dharmena satyena cha vartitavye brahman brahmavarte yatra jayan yajanti yagne yagneshwaram yagna vitana vikna. Therefore, O friend of irreligion, you do not deserve to remain in a place where experts perform sacrifices according to truth and religious principles for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Gneshwar, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the beneficiary of all kinds of sacrificial ceremonies. Such sacrificial ceremonies are prescribed differently in the scriptures for different ages. In other words, sacrifice means to accept the supremacy of the Lord and thereby perform acts by which the Lord may be satisfied in all respects. Every age, every time period will have sacrifice. And Prabhupada is giving a very wonderful universal understanding of sacrifice. No matter what type of sacrifice it may be, because according to time, place, and circumstance, there is different sacrifices. And people may sacrifice different aspects and elements according to time, place, and circumstance. They may even sacrifice to different personalities according to time, place, and circumstance. But the principle of sacrifice, the law of sacrifice, the meaning of sacrifice is very clear. And what does it mean? To accept the supremacy of the Lord and thereby perform acts by which the Lord may be satisfied in all respects. So we may sacrifice our wealth, our time, our life, whatever we may sacrifice. The meaning of that sacrifice is recognition, acceptance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and for the pleasure of Krishna. Just like we may fast on Ekadasi. Fasting on Ekadasi is a sacrifice, but it's a sacrifice where we're acknowledging the supremacy of the Supreme Lord, and we're acknowledging that this is for the pleasure of Krishna. So this is the consciousness that needs to be there behind every form of sacrifice. Any other agenda, any other motive, any other reason for sacrifice is tainted and will not lead to the desired result. The atheists do not believe in the existence of God, and so they do not perform any sacrifice for the satisfaction of the Lord. Any place or country where the supremacy of the Lord is accepted and thus sacrifice is performed is called Brahmavarta. There are different countries in different parts of the world, and each and every country may have different types of sacrifices to please the Supreme Lord. But the central point is pleasing Him is ascertained in the Bhagavatam, and it is truthfulness. The basic principle of religion is truthfulness, and the ultimate goal of all religions is to satisfy the Lord. So see how universal Prabhupada is not, or the Bhagavatam and Prabhupada is not saying, oh yes, if you belong to this faith and you not, if you're not chanting Hare Krishna, for example, then that is taboo, that is not proper, that is, you're going against the principles. No. Somebody may not be chanting Hare Krishna, somebody may not be a devotee of Krishna himself, but according to his own situation, according to time, place, and circumstance where he is, according to the culture and education that he's brought up in, that person may still be sacrificing to a higher being that he accepts in his consciousness. He is living truthfully because he's accepting a supreme power. He may not call it Krishna, but he's accepting a supreme power. Whatever he's doing, he's genuinely doing it for the pleasure of that personality, that being, that source. And that act and that sacrifice will lead him higher and higher and closer to the Supreme Lord. So it's not condemned, it's encouraged, it's reinforced. So if we see someone like that, we can encourage them. Very good, you're doing like this. And then we take them to the next step. Someone may understand the supremacy of some personality, but they may not know that personality. So we want to acknowledge everyone that accepts someone as the Supreme Lord. And in this way, help them understand and increase the knowledge of the Supreme Lord. In this way, progressively helping them. In this age of Kali, the greatest common formula of sacrifice is the Sankirtan Yajna. Yes, we'll correct that. Thank you. The R is there. Just have to see it. Okay, good. That is the opinion of the experts who know how to propagate the process of Yajna. Lord Chaitanya preached this method of Yajna, and it is understood from this verse that the sacrificial method of Yajna, Sankirtan Yajna, may be performed anywhere and everywhere in order to drive away the personality of Kali and save human society from falling prey to the influence of the age. So Prabhupada shared about the universal principle meaning of sacrifice. And then he brings it to a practical application in our own lives. In this current situation. And in this current situation, in the age of Kali, the greatest common formula of sacrifice is Sankirtan Yajna, congregational chanting. This is the opinion of experts who know how to propagate the process of Yajna. Lord Chaitanya preached this method of Yajna and is understood from this verse The sacrificial method of Sankirtan Yajna may be performed anywhere and everywhere in order to drive away the person of Kali. So if we want to be saved from the influence of Kali, then the sacrifice that we need to perform is Sankirtan Yajna. We need to embrace this process. If we embrace the process of Sankirtan Yajna, we will keep Kali away. We will be able to keep ourselves free from Kali, and we will be able to protect those who are involved in the sacrifice of Sankirtan Yajna from the personality of Kali. Text 34. Yasmin Harir Bhagavan Ijyamana Ijyatma Murtir Yajatam Samtanoti Kaman Amoghan Sharira Jangamanam Antar Bahir Vayur Ivaishya Atma. In all sacrificial ceremonies, although sometimes a demigod is worshipped, the Supreme Lord, personality of Godhead, is worshipped because he is the super soul of everyone and exists both inside and outside like the air. Thus, it is he only who awards all welfare to the worshipper. So remember, we talked about Prabhupada is giving the principle of sacrifice. So even if a sacrifice apparently involves other personalities, other beings, the proper understanding is that Supreme Lord still bestows the benedictions. Even though it is sometimes seen that the demigods like Indra and Chandra are worshipped and offered sacrificial awards, the reward of all such sacrifices are awarded by the worshipper, awarded to the worshipper by the Supreme Lord. And it is the Lord only who can offer all welfare to the worshipper. The demigods, although worshipped, cannot do anything without the sanction of the Lord, because the Lord is the super soul of everyone, both moving and non-moving. The Bhagavad Gita 9:23, the Lord himself confirms this in the following sloka. Ye apyanya devata bhakta yajante shraddhayan vita tepi mam eva kondaya yajnayatva vidi purvakam. Those who are the devotees of other gods and who worship them with faith actually worship only me, O son of Kunti, but they do so in a wrong. The fact that the Supreme Lord is one without a second, there is no God other than the Lord himself. Thus, the Supreme Lord is eternally transcendental to the material creation. But there are many who worship demigods like the sun, the moon, and Indra, who are only material representatives of the Supreme Lord. These demigods are indirect, qualitative representations of the Supreme Lord. A learned scholar or devotee, however, knows who is who. Therefore, he directly worships the Supreme Lord and is not diverted by material qualitative representations. Those who are not so learned worship such qualitative material representations, but their worship is unceremonious because it is irregular. So the Bhagavatam is directing practitioners to only worship directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We respect Krishna's creation and those who are administering Krishna's creation in this world. But our worship should be directed to Krishna and Krishna alone. Those who are worshiping the demigods, they are worshiping Krishna indirectly, and they may be on their journey. But those who are now intelligent and are taking to the process of Krishna consciousness, we should understand that as directed by the Bhagavatam, our sacrifice, our surrender, our worship should be directed solely and wholly directly to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is what the Bhagavatam came to present in this world. That is why the Bhagavatam was given to us by Srila Vyasadeva. Srila Vyasadeva had given so many Vedas, so many branches of knowledge in the Vedas, indirectly presenting the Supreme Lord, but not giving Krishna. And after doing all that, he was dissatisfied. We covered that in the first few chapters of the first canto. And Narad Muni, his spiritual master, directed him, why are you not satisfied? Reason is because you have not glorified the Supreme Personality of Godhead directly. You have not given Krishna directly. You have given Krishna indirectly. And when you give Krishna indirectly, then it's not glorious. It's not wonderful. It may help certain people, but it's not, the soul will not be happy. Why? Because the soul does not have a relationship with those who are representing the Krishna in this material world, like the demigods. No, the soul is not a servant of a demigod. The soul is a servant of Krishna. The Swarup, the Jiva Swarup, the Swarup of the living entity is Krishna Nityadas. One is a servant of Krishna. So that relationship should be cultivated. In Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada extends us even further. He says, yes, even though Narayan is the Supreme Personality of God, but we want to worship the two-armed form of Krishna, of the Supreme Lord, not even Narayan. Really streaming, zooming it, focusing it. Krishna is the Lord and Master. We should direct our energy, our thoughts, our sacrifices, everything to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Brajendra Nanda, Shamsundar Krishna. Text 35. Suto vacha parikshitevam adishta sakalir jata vepatu tam udyatasim ahedam dandapanim ivodyatam. Sri Suta Goswami said, the personality of Kali, thus been ordered by Maj Parikshit, began to tremble in fear. Seeing the king before him like Yamaraj, ready to kill him, Kali spoke to the king as follows. The king was ready to kill the personality of Kali at once, as soon as he disobeyed his order. Otherwise, the king had no objection to allow him to prolong his life. The personality of Kali also, after attempting to get rid of the punishment in various ways, decided that he must surrender unto him, and thus he began to tremble in fear for his life. Fear of his life. The king or the executive head must be so strong as to stand before the personality of Kali like the personality of death, Yamaraj. The king's order must be obeyed, otherwise the culprit's life is at risk. That is the way to rule the personalities of Kali, who create disturbance in the normal life of the state citizens. So we can see the executive head, the rulers, they need to be very strong. They need to be able to face the culprits. The culprits need to fear these personalities. Because if the culprits do not fear, then they take advantage. We can see Kali could not take advantage of Maj Parikshit. Maj Parikshit was powerful. He was a Mahabhagat king. And therefore he had the Shakti, he had the devotion, he had the power, he had the skills to subdue Kali. And Kali could experience that, and therefore he feared Maj Parikshit. And that fear to subdue the Prabhupada is interesting. In the purport, Prabhupada says, That is the way to rule the personalities of Kali. We're talking about personalities of Kali, not just one Kali. The representatives of Kali, the associates of Kali, the agents of Kali. So if we have a strong king like Maharaj Parikshit, then all these culprits can be kept controlled in their situation. They can be kept in control so they don't expand their influence and disturb the citizens. Text 36. Kaliruvacha yatra kwa vattha vatsyami sarvabhauma tavag naya lakshaye tatra tatrapi tvam ateshu sharashanam. O your majesty, although I may live anywhere and everywhere under your order, I shall but see you with bow and arrows wherever I look. Purport. The person of Kali could see that Maharaj Parikshit was the emperor of all lands all over the world, and thus anywhere he might live, he would have to meet with the same mood of the king. The personality of Kali was meant for mischief, and Maharaj Parikshit was meant for subduing all kinds of mischief mongers, especially the personality of Kali. It was better, therefore, for the personality of Kali to have been killed by the king then and there instead of being killed elsewhere. He was, after all, a surrendered soul before the king, and it was for the king to do what was required. So Maharaj Parikshit told the king, told Kali that he should go and live in a place, and he's going to expand that place where he does not influence irreligious principles. But Kali is saying that wherever I go, I can't really live, because wherever the whole planet is practically under your rulership, and every place is ruled in a religious way. There's a religious ambience because of your influence as a powerful king, and that means there's really no place I can go. Tanme dharma britam shreshta stanam nrideshtum arhasi yatreva niyato vatsya atishtam te nusashanam. Therefore, O chief amongst the protectors of religion, please fix some place for me where I can live permanently under the protection of your government. The personality of Kali addressed Maharaj Parikshit as the chief amongst the protectors of religiosity, because the king refrained from killing a person who surrendered unto him. A surrendered soul should be given all protection, even though he may be an enemy. That is the principle of religion. And we can just imagine what sort of protection is given by the personality of Godhead to the persons who surrender unto him, not as an enemy, but as a devoted servitor. The Lord protects the surrendered soul from all sins and all resultant reactions of sinful acts. So here Prabhupada is giving that principle again that we can learn from Kali. If an enemy surrenders to the Supreme Lord, and we see that in so many pastimes, Krishna would give Kamsa, Ravana, all the demons a chance. That Krishna, in every pastime, even though the devotees would want Krishna to kill the enemies, Krishna would always give them an opportunity to surrender. And we see even in the pastime of Lord Ram told, even if Ravana comes and surrenders, still I'll forgive him. So Prabhupada is making the point that if an enemy can surrender and be protected, then what to talk about if a devotee surrenders? No doubt there will be protection. Text 38. Sutta vacha abhyartitastada tasmei stanam kalaye dado dutam pona striyam suna yatra dharmas chaturvida. Sutta Goswami said, Maharaj Parikshit, thus being petitioned by the personality of Kali, gave him permission to reside in places where gambling, drinking, prostitution, and animal slaughter were performed. So here we see these four sinful activities, pillars of irreligious life, being presented again. This is where Kali can live. So Kali's shelter, Kali's residence are these places where there's gambling, drinking, prostitution, and animal slaughter. We can understand Kali is living there. That is Kali's residence, Kali's influence. And Prabhupada gives an extensive purport. The basic principles of irreligiosity, such as pride, prostitution, intoxication, and falsehood, counteracts the four principles of religion, namely austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness. The personality of Kali was given permission to live in four places, particularly mentioned by the king, namely the place of gambling, the place of prostitution, the place of drinking, and the place of animal slaughter. So if you see Prabhupada in the beginning of the sentence, he equates the place of gambling related to the irreligious principle or quality of pride. Then prostitution, drinking, intoxication, and animal slaughter, falsehood. So there's these symptoms which are there if one breaks these or follows these sinful activities. Srila Jiva Goswami directs that drinking against such scriptural principles as those which govern the Sautramani Yagya, association with women outside marriage, and killing animals against the injunction of scriptures are irreligious. In the Vedas, two different types of injunctions are there. One type for the parvritas, or those who are engaged in material enjoyment, and another type for the nivritas, or those who are engaged in becoming liberated from material bondage. The Vedic injunctions for the parvritas is to gradually regulate the activities towards the path of liberation. Therefore, for those who are in the lower stage of ignorance and who indulge in wine, woman, and flesh, drinking by performing Sautramani Yagya, association with women by marriage, and flesh eating by sacrifices are sometimes recommended. Such recommendations in the Vedic literatures are meant for a particular class of men and not for all. But because they are injunctions of the Vedas for a particular type of person, such activities by the parvritas are not considered adharma. One man's food may be poison for another. Similarly, what is recommended for those in the mode of ignorance may be poison for those in the mode of goodness. Srila Jiva Goswami Prabhu therefore affirms that recommendations in scriptures for a certain class of men are never to be considered adharma or irreligious. But such activities are factually adharma, and they are never to be encouraged. The recommendation in the scriptures are not meant for the encouragement of such adharma, but for regulating the necessary adharma gradually towards the path of dharma. So here Prabhupada is, according to Jiva Goswami, shedding light that in scripture, because we know the Vedas are divided in three modes: goodness, passion, ignorance, and obviously beyond, Sudha Sattva. And the Vedas are divided in these three modes to direct souls according to those different modes. So there may be sacrifice in the lower mode, which are meant to guide people to the higher mode. Those in a higher mode should not discourage those following in the lower mode, but should understand that it is there simply to bring them to a higher level of Dharma, practicing Krishna consciousness. At the same time, those in a higher mode should not embrace principles on the lower, saying that it's all right. We have to keep moving higher and higher and transcending the lower modes. So we see this is applicable in all faiths. We find in Christianity, in Islam, even in the Vedas, there are principles and sacrifices for the lower modes, for those in the lower modes. And it is there to gradually help them to rise to higher and higher principles of Dharma. Following the footsteps of Parikshit, all the executive heads of states have a duty to see that the principles of religion, namely austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness, are established in the state, and that the principles of irreligion, namely pride, illicit, female association, or prostitution, intoxication, and falsity, are checked by all means, and to make the best use of a bad bargain. The personality of Kali may be transferred to places of gambling, drinking, prostitution, and animal slaughter, if there are any places like that. Because during the rule of Maharaj Parikshit, there were no places like that. Those who are addicted to these irreligious habits may be regulated by the injunctions of the scriptures. In no circumstance should such habits be encouraged by any state. In other words, the state should categorically stop all sorts of gambling, drinking, prostitution, and falsity. The state which wants to eradicate corruption by majority may introduce the principles of religion in the following manner. So now Prabhupada is giving some basic tenets that the state can apply. 2 compulsory fasting days in the month, if not more, austerity. Even from the economic point of view, such 2 fasting days in a month in the state will save tons of food, and the system will also act very favorably for the general health of the citizens. So fasting on Ekadasi, and see how Prabhupada is very expertly, you don't need to say, okay, everyone's going to fast on Ekadasi. No, 2 days of fasting, these are the days, and this is the austerity that's important for everyone, and it's going to help the economy, it's going to help the health. So win-win. Then 2, there must be compulsory marriage of young boys and girls attaining 24 years of age and 16 years of age respectively. There will be no harm in co-education in the schools and colleges, provided the boys and girls are duly married. And in the case there is any intimate connection between a male and a female student, they should be married properly without illicit relation. Divorce Act is encouraging prostitution and thus should be abolished. And we see, if you look at the trend, even in South Africa, and now they want to, there's a new education law that's coming into play, where the government will dictate what gets educated to your child. And sex education is going to be practically from a very young age. So there's going to be more and more disaster. And Kali is infiltrating more and more. And here Prabhupada is making the point, this is to keep Kali at bay. Otherwise, the influence of Kali will practically keep going and take over, and it's going to become more and more difficult as time progresses. So Divorce Act is definitely not encouraged, and loose association between boy and girl, this is also needs to be regulated. 3, the citizens of the state must give in charity at least 50% of their income for the purpose of creating spiritual atmosphere in a state or in human society, both individually and collectively. The principles of the Bhagavatam should be preached, namely, A, karma yoga, or doing everything for the satisfaction of the Lord. B, regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam for authorized persons or from authorized persons or realized souls. C, chanting the glories of the Lord congregationally at home or at the place of worship. D, rendering all kinds of service to the Bhagavatas engaged in preaching of Srimad Bhagavatam. And E, residing in place where the atmosphere is saturated with God consciousness. So very, very clear principles that can be enforced. The welfare of everyone. If the state is regulated by the above process, naturally there will be God consciousness everywhere. Gambling of all description, even speculative business enterprise, is considered to be degrading. And when gambling is encouraged in the state, there is a complete disappearance of truthfulness. Allowing young boys and girls to remain unmarried past the above mentioned ages and licensing animal slaughterhouses of all description should be at once prohibited. The flesh eaters may be allowed to take flesh as mentioned in scriptures, but not otherwise. Intoxication of all descriptions, even smoking cigarettes, chewing tobacco, and drinking tea must be prohibited. So that was Prabhupada's guideline for a Krishna conscious state, Krishna conscious government. And as time progresses, we will see this slowly becoming a reality. Text 39. Punascha yacha manaya jatarupa adat prabhu tato nritam madam kamam rajo vairam chapa raja vairam chapanchamam. The personality of Kali asked for something more, and because of his begging, the king gave him permission to live where there is gold, because wherever there is gold, there is also falsity, intoxication, lust, envy, and enmity. Purport. Although Maharaj Parikshit gave Kali permission to live in 4 places, it was very difficult for him to find the places because during the reign of Maharaj Parikshit, there were no such places. Therefore, Kali asked the king to give him something practical, which could be utilized for his nefarious purposes. Maharaj Parikshit thus gave him permission to live in place where there is gold, because where there is gold, there are all the above mentioned 4 things, and over and above them, there is enmity also. So the personality of Kali also became gold standardized. According to Srimad Bhagavatam, gold encourages falsity, intoxication, prostitution, envy, and enmity. Even a gold standard exchange and currency is bad. Gold standard currency is based on falsehood because the currency is not on par with the reserved gold. The basic principle is falsity because currency notes are issued in value beyond that of the actual reserved gold. This artificial inflation of currency by the authorities encourages prostitution of the state economy. The prices of commodities become artificially inflated because of bad money or artificial currency notes. Bad money drives away good money. Instead of paper currency, actual gold coins should be used for exchange, and this will stop the prostitution of gold. Gold ornaments for women may be allowed by control, not by quality, but by quantity. This will discourage lust, envy, and enmity. When there is actual gold currency in the form of coins, the influence of gold in producing falsity, prostitution, etc. will automatically cease. There will be no need for any anti-corruption ministry for another term of prostitution and falsity of purpose. So Kali requested Maharaj Parikshit, there is no places where there is these sinful activities in your kingdom. And since I've surrendered unto you, I need some shelter. So please give me shelter. And Maharaj Parikshit said, okay, you can reside where there is gold. And then Prabhupada begins to elaborate very, very wonderfully in terms of gold. So gold, where Kali resides, have these propensities of falsity, intoxication, prostitution, envy, and enmity. And then Prabhupada goes on and elaborate the gold standard or gold standardization aspect, where we know that this happened in America, where they took off, they dislodged the currency US dollar from the gold standard, and then just started printing money. And as they print the money, then it does not equate to the gold that is there in reserves. So in that way, obviously, all the ramification probably explaining inflation, price in goods escalating, etc. And there's an artificial economy that starts to exist. So every period of history where currency was dislodged from the gold standard, that means fiat currency, always went through a cycle of, let's say, increase and crash. Because of the practicality of such a mechanism, there is a boom in the economy. But then because of it being dislodged from the actual gold to back up the value of the currency, the amount of printing that you do, then the value of that currency practically becomes withered away and cease to exist. And we see right now at our current period in time, if you research, you'll see the dollar is practically worthless. And all the countries are in great debt. And most of the economy crashes that we have experienced, the central bank simply prints more money to try to keep the situation from exploding. But that is the artificial way or artificial economy that exists. And an artificial economy cannot survive. It always falls back, defaults back. And currently in the economy, or in the world, what's happening is more and more people are appreciating, understanding that when money is backed by real commodity like gold, then there is more stability. And few of the countries that are coming together have already created a currency that's backed by gold. So we see how Prabhupada is highlighting this fact in the Bhagavatam. This was there already 5,000 years ago. Since time immemorial, the economy, we know that Prabhupada always says the real economy is based on land, grains, cows. That's where real wealth lies. But natural resources like gold is also what was used as a medium of exchange. Now, Kali was residing or was given permission to reside where there's gold. So when gold is not used in the service of Krishna, then that gold becomes the residence of Kali. When gold is hoarded and not used in Krishna's service, that gold becomes a residence of Kali. And where Kali resides, irreligiosity resides. Text 40. Amuni panchastanani yad-dharma prabhava Kali atto autaryena dattani nyavasat tan nisheda krit. Thus, the person of Kali, by the direction of Maj Parikshit, the son of Uttara, was allowed to live in those 5 places. Purport. Thus, the age of Kali began the gold standardization. and therefore falsity, intoxication, animal slaughter, and prostitution are rampant all over the world. And the sanest section is eager to drive out corruption. The counteracting process is suggested above, and everyone can take advantage of this suggestion. So what will resolve the issues, the troubles, the corruption, the difficulties, the exploitation that the world is currently experiencing? Prabhupada gave his points in the previous purport in terms of fasting, in terms of the principles of glorification of the Supreme Lord, etc. That is the only solution. One may introduce, fiat currency, cryptocurrency, digital currency. It doesn't matter what you introduce if you do not take the process that is revealed by our acharyas, by Srila Prabhupada, then there is no proper remedy, right? It's basically a temporary solution, and it's only a matter of time that you need to find another solution and another solution and another solution. So the real solution to eradicate all our miseries, individually, collectively, as a planet, is really to propound the Bhagavatam, the practices of the Bhagavatam, Krishna consciousness. Therefore, we see that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Samaj, when Srila Prabhupada came to see Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Samaj and wanted, when he heard Srila Bhakti Samaj talking about Krishna consciousness, Srila Prabhupada was thinking, first we have to get, India needs to be independent, need to get independence. And Srila Bhakti Samaj said, there is no time for that, right? The immediate need, the immediate lack is Krishna consciousness, not independence, not, bring in other currency or in this situation or this remedy. No, the real remedy is a lack of Krishna consciousness. So the more we become Krishna conscious individually, the more we can influence those around us, the more we spread Krishna consciousness with Srila Prabhupada's books, the more people will be exposed to this knowledge of Krishna consciousness, the more the leaders direct and strategize to spread Krishna consciousness very intelligently, the more people will be exposed to this knowledge. And in this way, the more souls that are now resonating with frequency of Krishna consciousness come together. And we can then control countries, governments, control in a nice way, control for the benefit and the welfare of all citizens, not for exploitation, even for the benefit of the animals, because they're also praja, they're also citizens. So in this way, everyone can live very harmoniously, very peacefully. Text 41. Ataitani na seveta bhushu purushas vachit visheshato dharma shilo rajaloka patir guru. Therefore, whoever desires progressive well-being, especially kings, religionists, public leaders, brahmanas, and sannyasis, should never come in contact with the four above mentioned irreligious principles. And therefore, we see how Prabhupada was so expert, the acharyas in our line were so expert, that those who are serious practitioners will make a vow to follow the four regular principles: no meat eating, no illicit sex, no gambling, no intoxication. Basically saying, no Kali, no influence of Kali. I don't want Kali, no to Kali. And Prabhupada says if one followed these, he's practically sinless. Very, very powerful. The Brahmanas are the religious preceptors of all other castes, and the sannyasis are the spiritual masters of all the castes and orders of society. Thus, the Brahmanas and the sannyasis have very great responsibilities in society. So also do the king and the public leaders, who are responsible for the material welfare of all people. The progressive religionists and those who are responsible human beings, those who do not want to spoil their valuable human lives, should refrain from all the principles of irreligiosity, especially illicit connection with women. If a Brahmana is not truthful, all his claims as a Brahmana at once becomes null and void. If a sannyasi is illicitly connected with women, all his claims as a sannyasi at once becomes false. Similarly, if a king and a public leader are unnecessarily proud or habituated to drinking and smoking, certainly they will become disqualified to discharge public welfare activities. Truthfulness is the basic principle of all religions. Four leaders of human society, namely the sannyasis, the brahmanas, the king, and the public leader, must be tested crucially by their character and qualification. Therefore, before one can be accepted as a spiritual or material master of society, he must be tested by the above-mentioned criteria of character. Such public leaders may be less qualified in academic qualifications, but it is necessary primarily that they be free from the contamination of the four disqualifications, namely gambling, drinking, prostitution, and animal slaughter. So yes, academics is there, but not the criteria to select those who are leading. Those who are leading should be exemplary, and exemplary starting with the most foundational religious principle of truthfulness. They need to be truthful to their order, to their ashram, to their varna. And for each, as Prabhupada is elaborating, there is different aspects that is very, very important for them to avoid. Ultimately, we see Prabhupada emphasizing for those who are practitioners, those who want to make the best use of the bad bargain, those who want to not spoil the human form of life, those who want to perfect the human form of life, to follow all the four principles of religious life. That means avoiding gambling, drinking, prostitution, and animal slaughter. In this way, become situated in character to lead one's own life and to lead others. This is the qualification. So when more and more people are exposed to this understanding that these are the people you want to vote for, you don't want to vote for someone who just has some academic qualification, but you really want to vote for those who have character, and ultimately those who are devotional, like Maharaj Parikshit, because that is the real, that is where a real leader can lead. Materially managing is good, but not the best. We want to lead people spiritually. As spiritual beings, that is the proper leadership that we want to encourage. And Prabhupada is guiding how that spiritual leadership can slowly be applied individually, and then collectively, and then holistically for the whole human race, so that everyone can practice Krishna consciousness and perfect their lives. And we find that in the line of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, not only are we just directing souls to develop a relationship with Krishna and revive our devotional loving relationship, but we also have an opportunity to be exposed to the highest level of devotion exhibited by the residents of Vrindavan, the gopis of Vrindavan, where even the Supreme Lord Krishna has to beg forgiveness from these exalted devotees that he cannot reciprocate, he cannot pay back their surrender, their devotion, their sacrifice. So this is the greatest blessing that we have at this point in time in our lives in Krishna consciousness, that we have taken birth at this point where Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to reveal the highest level of devotion exhibited by the residents of Vrindavan to the world. And Prabhupada, following in the footsteps and the desire of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, has practically chalked out the way, the process, and has given the backing of Krishna consciousness, knowledge, so much foundational knowledge, so much knowledge to elaborate, to expand, to share, to build, to lead everyone systematically, progressively to this highest level of devotion. Vantarat Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai, Go Pramanande, Hari Hari. Thank you for everyone's presence. If there are any questions or comments, you can please share in the chat. So there was a question by Shamananda Prabhu, where is the soul of non-moving objects situated? Example, trees and mountains. So previously, okay, so trees are living and non-moving, restricted. And the question is, where are souls situated in the trees? And mountains are also living. And where are they situated? So from my limited understanding, we know that in the human body, the soul is in the region of the heart. I have not come across, I've not read, and naturally I've not read everything that's out there, where the soul of the tree exists, specifically in the body of the tree. I have read Srila Prabhupada in Life Comes from Life. Prabhupada talks about the spirit soul in, like, for example, diamonds. Right? Those souls that want to exhibit or want to merge with Brahman effulgence, want to exhibit, so they get that opportunity to become diamonds, and they in that stone. So in that sense, there may be multiple souls within that stone. And because there is no heart in that sense, so they may be dispersed within the molecular structure. What we know is that the super soul is still there with them, even in that body. So yes, I haven't really read, like, for example, in a tree, where specifically, whether there are multiple souls in the tree permeating. There's obviously a main soul, just like, for example, in this body, there's not only one soul. There is the predominator soul that's really governing this body and giving life to this body. But there are trillions and billions upon billions of other souls. Every cell in this body is a living entity, and the soul is in there. Your blood cells, parasites, bacteria, trillions. Like sometimes in a spoon of medicine, there can be trillions of bacteria. When you take a probiotic, in a probiotic, there are trillions of antibodies, viruses, good viruses, etc. So when you take that, they're all in your gut, they're all in your body. So in this body is a city of 9 gates. there are trillions and trillions and trillions of souls. And there is one predominating soul who's driving this vehicle. And when that soul leaves, then this body starts to decompose, and all the souls that are in this body will have to now make their way to the next destination. So in the tree's body, we know that there is one soul that's in the tree's body due to past became that tree. But like our body, there's also infinite number of souls also in the body of the tree with the same logic. And the same logic may also apply in terms of, mountains, etc. Why? We can also take this in relation to Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains, and Prabhupada expands on this purport, that the soul is sarvagata, all-pervading. So that means that even in space, right now, even in the space around, there's souls everywhere. There is no space where there is no soul existing. It's just that they are in a different dimension or different form compared to the physical form that we're experiencing. But souls are all pervading. So in that sense, there's a predominating soul. We're not sure where that soul is situated. Definitely that soul is there. But there are unlimited number of other souls, part of an ecosystem, interdependent, which are all pervading. And that's why if one is practicing Krishna consciousness, just like if one is consuming Krishna prasad, I say this is food for life. Food for life starts with you. You're also feeding yourself. Because when you feed yourself, when you take prasad, then you're feeding all the cells in your body, all the souls in your body. Food for life is there. When you're chanting Hare Krishna, all the souls in your body are also experiencing, getting benefit of Krishna consciousness. Even the souls around are getting the benefit of Krishna consciousness. I shared that pastime of, I think it was Guru Kripa Prabhu. He, when he went to one place like China, I may have a devotee, but there was one devotee that went to China and started a center, and it was just too difficult to get people to come to the center. So he decided, no, I think we need to close the center. So he closed the center and he went to, do another service. Prabhupada then met him and asked him, how's the center going? He said, no, he closed it. And he says, because nobody's coming. Prabhupada said, no, I want you to go back, open up a center, open up an office, and just sit and chant. That's all. And he shares that actually Prabhupada's idea was that if I just sit and chant, then the vibration will permeate, will start to influence everyone. It will influence the people around me that are, like the spirit souls, neighbors, city, and slowly that will have impact. So Prabhupada had this foresight. All right, wonderful. Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments? Shamananda Krishna Prabhu says, brilliant and illuminating Srimad Bhagavatam class. Thank you very much, Prabhu, for putting so much time and perhaps presentation. Kali beware. Thank you very much for your feedback, Shamananda Krishna Prabhu. Right. Are there any questions or feedback from anyone else before we end the session? All good. All right. Good. Then next week, we will continue and complete this chapter and then move on to the next chapter. So let us continue associating with Srimad Bhagavatam and today is also, as we mentioned, the disappearance of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and the disappearance of Gadadhar Pandit Prabhu. So if you have a chance, you can try to listen to some of their glories. Srila Prabhupada says Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was really the pioneer of Krishna consciousness, to spread Krishna consciousness in this modern world. And Gadadhar Pandit Prabhu is Srimati Radhavani. She did not want to miss out. In fact, nobody in Krishna Leela, nobody in Krishna's pastimes in Goloka Vrindavan wanted to miss the opportunity to take part in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. So they all appeared, including Srimati Radhavani as Gadadhar Pandit Prabhu. And here we are, by some good fortune, where we are also part of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes are continuing, and by some unknown good fortune, mercy of Srila Prabhupada, as follows, we have come in contact with Krishna consciousness, and we have some part to play in becoming Krishna conscious ourselves and in spreading Krishna consciousness to others. So please take full advantage of this opportunity that we have received, and perfect your life and help perfect others. Thank you. Grantanath Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Nitai, O Pramanande, Hari Hari Bol.